Good afternoon. I am Andrea Chisholm with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're watching on onespotmedia.com. Approximately 90% of samples from the Alorica call center in Portmore St. Catherine have been tested for COVID-19. At Wednesday's press briefing, the chief medical officer indicated, however, that more contact tracing should be done in relation to that workplace cluster.
Our real aim at this point, based on having tested the workers and then testing their contacts, our appeal at this point would be to the Alorica workers who have elderly persons in their homes or who have anybody who have persons who may be at risk for more severe disease, to say that these are the persons that we would want to monitor very carefully. We have gone now about 3 incubation periods since the start of Alorica. And so therefore, we'd be expecting that the contacts of the first set of contacts would be the persons, and that is getting into the homes.
The Alorica call center is responsible for the majority of the 488 positive cases of COVID-19 in Jamaica. In the meantime, Dr. Bisesa Mackenzie says the Health Ministry is monitoring the situation at the Conduent BPO facility, also in Portmore St. Catherine.
We have not had any additional positive workers so far, but we continue to test, okay? We've had another batch of tests that have come in that we have to go through in order to make sure that we don't miss anyone. But so far, that situation is looking good.
And the Health Ministry has admitted to challenges to sourcing some material to test for COVID-19, but argues that those challenges have not affected its capacity to test for the virus. Opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Maurice Guy, has questioned a shortage of viral transport medium, one of the components needed to test for COVID-19. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Jacqueline Bisesa Mackenzie says there were challenges in getting the material from overseas, and so the ministry sought help from the University of the West Indies. She adds that the supply chain, transporting the equipment from the university to different testing facilities, may have been unreliable at times.
The university, initially when we were short, were making up 500 per week for us. After that, last week, 2,000 were made up. And so we don't presently have a shortage.
2,000 per week, CMO.
Well, 2,000 were made up last week. This week, we have 3,000 vials, because what we've had to do, we've had to import the vials and import the raw material, the agar and all the other constituents to make that up.
And samples were not being restricted because on the basis that we don't have this particular input. And that's the clarity. So what Dr. Webster Carr was saying was, yes, we have had some issues similar to what the CMO is saying, but that doesn't mean that it explains that we only tested 120 people 2 days ago. And that's very important, because I don't want the public, as I believe you do not either, to get the impression that testing has fallen off because we do not have the testing material, because that would be false.
The Health Minister and Chief Medical Officer were speaking at Wednesday's Special Select Committee of Parliament to discuss the COVID-19 response. In the meantime, with several concerns about access to medical care for patients who do not have COVID-19, the Health Ministry is moving to normalize operations at facilities. Patients entering hospitals will therefore be tested for the coronavirus.
The possibility, or the belief that somebody could be COVID positive for whatever reason at all does not detract from getting what needs to be done for that person. So we think that's taking the stance that we would want to test everyone that comes into the hospital, so that persons can have a certain level of comfort in terms of any type of management that is required for these patients. I don't have to wait on a test result, because the persons would have been processed, be part of their processing to come into facilities.
A parliamentary committee is concerned that enough money has not been allocated to the local government ministry to maintain COVID-19 mitigation measures. For April and May, $236 million will be spent on a number of initiatives, including screening, as well as the cleaning and sanitization of infirmaries and Golden Age homes. This week's Public Administration and Appropriations Committee of Parliament was told that some of the money was also used for the special feeding program and to help the poor. The local government ministry is set to get $150 million more.
This 150 looks like a drop in the bucket to what it is that you actually need. So if we were to go, to carry out this exercise for another 2 months, what is the estimate that the ministry has in carrying this out? Because then you will need additional funds, and where will those funds come from?
We utilize what we have in the best possible manner, and I'm positive that the government is committed to providing any additional resourcing that may be required.
There are 12 state-run infirmaries, 2 Golden Age homes, and 1 main shelter operated by the ministry. 40 thermometers were bought to do temperature checks. And with COVID-19 forcing many small businesses between a rock and a hard place, stakeholders believe there are specific strategies that businesses can use to keep afloat. The issue was discussed last night during the RGR Gleaner Group's virtual town hall meeting.
Lariton Lawrence is the owner of Firewood Bar and Grill in Savannah Lamar, Westmoreland.
Well, since COVID-19, operations have gone down drastically. I had 5 staff working. Everyone had to be sent home like 3 weeks after COVID. Operation has ceased since then.
But he's just one of many small business operators who are feeling the economic pinch from COVID-19. Deputy CEO at the Jamaica Business Corporation, Harold Davis, says based on a recent survey, the impact of COVID-19 on small businesses is significant. The survey focused on how small businesses are coping during the crisis, and the result showed
80% of them reported that they had business shrinking, sales shrinking by upwards of 90%, up to 90% of their sales just diminished and vanished immediately. Others, about 28% of them said at that time in early April that they had to shutter their operations and send their staff home. Others were fortunate enough to have products that they could probably pivot online and that type of thing.
However, Mr. Davis believes there are strategies that could be employed for the survival of small businesses during the crisis.
We have been working non-stop with our clients to help them to think about innovative ways in which they can keep their business doors open, first of all, and perhaps more importantly, strengthen the business itself with various income channels, that after this crisis, the business itself will be a little more resilient than it was even before going into the crisis.
Additionally, maximizing the use of online platforms is recommended. But for small businesses which did not have online platforms before COVID-19, the move may be too expensive. But business coach Yannick Page says partnerships can be utilized to offset that cost.
So I think what people need to do is to start looking at established digital platforms. I think I heard you mention earlier people who need to do e-commerce. It was either yourself or Harold, right? And remember that there are currently operators in Jamaica who have set up e-commerce platforms. So I think now is the time to leverage some of those platforms. There are deal sites that have been operational for several years. Now is the time to actually use other people and to partner.
As for e-commerce, now might be the perfect time for small businesses to get engaged.
The regulators, the DOJ, under the leadership of Richard Basel, have indicated that they have established what they refer to as a sandbox model, whereby people with, for example, fintech type solutions can get the opportunity to fast track and to have a scenario wherein they can test their product, they can test the viability, they can test connectivity, and so we could fast track it to market. So I believe the environment is right for that type of innovation.
They were speaking on the RGR Gleaner Group Town Hall on small businesses on Thursday. Giovanni Dennis, TVJ News.
And it's time for a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. We have more stories when we return. Welcome back, and we're continuing the news. Work continues on 5 of 15 sections of roadways under the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project in St. Thomas and Portland. Shane Masters tells us more.
It's business as usual for the National Works Agency NWA as it seeks to get a major national infrastructure program online. That is, the much talked about highway leading from Harborview in St. Andrew into St. Thomas and onto Portland. According to communications manager at the NWA, Stephen Shaw, a total of $3.7 billion is being spent on 3 of the packages, which include Morant Bay to Prospect, Morant Bay to Georgia, and Georgia to Cedar Valley. He says what is being done now is the preparation work. For example, the building of a seawall in Morant Bay.
Along the road from Morant Bay to Cedar Valley, we have several bits of works taking place, mainly to do with drainage features and bridges. We also will be doing extensive retaining structures or retaining walls construction, because especially along the stretch from Georgia to Cedar Valley, we have had situations where walls have been washed away. We have had houses collapsing into the river, owing to the walls being damaged.
Mr. Shaw said the work being undertaken will be building new roads. Now, as for employment,
many persons in the parish and in the direct communities will be employed, because the construction of retaining walls is highly labor intensive. It's not that, we are going to be using mass concrete. It's going to be traditional walls in the main that we are going to be putting up, and so there will be the need for persons to be employed.
Shane Masters, TVJ News.
Farmers in Flagaman St. Elizabeth have received equipment to protect life and property if there's a fire. More from Giovanni Dennis.
Farmers in Flagaman St. Elizabeth are no strangers to destructive field fires. In one of the most recent fires, close to 50 farmers were affected when more than 200 acres of farmland with crops were destroyed. And with the annual dry season now upon them, the threat has returned. Stakeholders have stepped up to help with mitigation efforts. The fire brigade handed over 2 extinguisher pumps to a group of farmers. The farmers were given pointers on how to operate the machines.
Farmers in Flagaman were given some backpacks that they can use to quickly out small fires. Remember last year we would have had a devastating fire that took away hundreds of acres of prime farming land in Flagaman. And part of what we've been doing over the last year is working with the residents to ensure that we don't have a reoccurrence. So the fire brigade has gone in and they have done training. They have identified people to act as wardens, and this is the next step of the project. Where they see a fire that may have been lit by somebody, they can go out and they can extinguish it even before calling the fire brigade.
The division is a very large parish. We only have 2 stations in the division, and sometimes we have to travel, long distances to get to the scene of a fire. So with the aid of these backpack, farmers can knock fires down when they start up quickly so that they don't spread and get out of control.
The project is being undertaken in collaboration with the Meteorological Office of Jamaica. The next target is to develop a bushfire warning system. But until then, it's important for farmers to avoid practices such as slash and burn.
We're partnering, myself as MP and the Municipal Corporation, to work with the community residents so that, one, they will have proper practices in relation to the lighting of fires and not lighting fires any at all.
Giovanni Dennis, TVJ News.
Councillor for the Trafalgar Division, Kari Douglas, who has been charged with breaching the Disaster Risk Management Act and disorderly conduct, had her bail extended when she appeared before the Kingston and St. Andrew Parish Court this morning. The matter is set for mention on September 15. Her attorney, Peter Champagny, told our news center that he's to receive disclosure of the case file next week. Ms. Douglas's charges stemmed from an April 7 incident in which she was stopped by the cops in the Kingston 19 area. When questioned by the police, Ms. Douglas reportedly failed to prove she was a counselor or give a satisfactory reason for being on the road during the curfew. According to the police, Ms. Douglas became uncooperative and behaved boisterously while hurling abusive language. She has denied the allegations. With over 300 JUTC sub-franchise operators unable to make fee payments, the Transport Operators Development Sustainable Services has requested a waiver. The association's president, Edgerton Newman, says the waiver is needed as the public transport sector has been suffering without a fare increase for the last 8 years. But managing director of the JUTC, Paul Abrams, says it's not something the state-run entity can accommodate at this time.
A moratorium based on transport authorities' time period. So it is something that we may want to take a look at, if possible, with the Minister of Transport and Mining.
Meantime, Mr. Abrams says the bus company is also being affected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The impact has affected us, but we're working within the means as best as possible. And the Minister of Finance will assist us where necessary.
A driver fled the scene of a 3-vehicle collision along the Pondside Main Road in St. Thomas this morning. According to reports, about 8:30, a driver of a Honda was speeding when he collided in a Toyota Yaris. The driver then sped off before another vehicle was caught in the accident. An alleged eyewitness gave this account.
Watch what going on now. Toyota Yaris come up the road nice and easy. The Honda man was a boom bam slapping him back. When the smoke clear, Honda man gone. You see what I say? Pro box man just unfortunate for caught the situation and go about in business. Me now because I'm a skilled driver, I have a brand new 2019 Honda card. I can't afford for my car. Like, if I say boom bam 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 and take up myself.
Although the vehicles were damaged, no one was injured. Authorities are pleading to motorists to drive carefully. In news overseas, the U.S. economy lost over 20 million jobs in April. It's the steepest plunge in payrolls since the Great Depression more than 100 years ago. And in sports, horse racing appears to be the first local sport in line to get the green light for a resumption. This follows the suspension, cancellation or postponement of sporting events due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Spencer Darlington tells us more.
TVJ Sports understands that a proposal has been put forward for racing to resume at Caymanas Park on June 6. The promoting company, Supreme Ventures Racing and Entertainment Limited, met with the leadership for key stakeholder groups in a video link meeting on Thursday where the proposal was put on the table. It's further understood that the resumption would see racing being held without spectators, in keeping with government guidelines and the restriction on gatherings at various events. A release from SVREL late Thursday evening said there would be a reopening of the main racetrack effective Friday. A decision was taken last weekend to scale down racetrack operations. The release added that Thursday's meeting with industry stakeholders was brokered by President of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, Keith Duncan, and was in keeping with an overall aim to create and retain employment in the racing community at all levels. In the meantime, a reliable source told TVJ Sports that members of the various occupational groups have agreed to take a 4% cut in purse monies until financial stability returns to the local racing industry. The leadership for the various stakeholder groups are expected to sign a memorandum of understanding regarding the proposals accepted on Thursday for this document to be returned to the Project Monitoring Committee by the end of the day. In the meantime, no decision has been reached as yet regarding the reopening of the over 120 off-track betting parlors and the guidelines that would govern their reopening. Representatives from the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission, the Project Monitoring Committee, the Jamaica Racing Commission, the United Racehorse Trainers Association, the Jamaica Racehorse Trainers Association, the Jamaica Racehorse Owners Association, TOBA, the Jamaica Jockeys Guild, and the Grooms Association of Jamaica were involved in Thursday's meeting. The Project Monitoring Committee's 5-point proposal for the resumption of racing includes lobbying the Ministry of Health to put similar guidelines in place, like those for BPOs and supermarkets, to facilitate the speedy resumption of racing. Attempts to get a response from Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton were unsuccessful. Live racing at Caymanas Park has been suspended indefinitely since March 21. Spencer Darlington, TVJ Sports.
And that's the Midday News. I'm Andrea Chisholm. Join us at 7 for the Primetime News Package. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, good afternoon and have a great weekend.